We even find now that crickets aren't even good as a protein source. Won't even be good for Soylent Green in their silence. Breaking news, I guess, this week. Thank you for giving me that through Twitter, Behind a Woodshed. You can follow my lessening antics as there's more and more work that I'm doing that take me away from certain things. And it's just indicative, folks. The signs are around us. The notice is to us. You can't even be a cricket and be worth of anything. I mean, the protein level is just not there. We're not going to even be good Soylent Green. You might as well make something, be valuable in your own self. As I said, this is about us. Have some self-respect. Look around and figure out that there's some wrong out there that you need to really make right. I don't know what else to do here as we go through and what we are doing, as non-promotional as we end up doing it, watching things happen around just even coincidentally. You know, like I told you, everyone wants to say that there is no coincidence. I believe in coincidences. You're surrounded by coincidences. The fact is that you existing in the time you look at the placement of something on a table is a coincidence. But it doesn't have any meaning is what I've been looking at. And so we may not know that. But I'll tell you what, when you get involved and you start to engage yourself, and it may take a long time, you have to go in for the long haul on this stuff. And they told us this in these simple little statements. You have to be ever vigilant and diligent to preserve your, I hate to use the word freedom because that's a domain of being free, which means that there's some construct within which you exist. So we understand that problem. Being free, you will have to, at least to the extent of someone else's rights, you will have to be asserting them at every turn. Why? Because as I exampled to myself, just the story of Cain versus Abel, if brother will kill a brother, we started out wrong. In us, in parts, some of us will have that nature in us that's just not good. And so, maybe just for me, to make it simple for my pea brain, I reduced a lot of things down so I didn't have to tax myself. The government's doing enough of that. That I understood, if you're going to maintain rights, you can't give it to someone else, and you can't remain silent, and you have to step up. And so, knowing that, and I also know the bottom line is that we haven't been taught. But that's not an excuse, folks. The occupier doesn't care. The enemy doesn't care. Whatever that enemy is, doesn't care. And the enemy is there because it's not consistent with you. In whatever capacity. And so that's the thing I say. For you, find what is wrong and go make it right. And if we were all doing a little bit of that, as much as we could, I think the world becomes a better place. Now, certainly I can be wrong, but I'd certainly like us to at least try that. Let's make that experiment. At least in my experience, getting engaged, for as much as it has taken me away from what I would have chosen to do, is making strides to get us back to the place that we should have never left, which is also our fault. So we have to observe the world in certain ways to cut through the nonsense and cut through the continued charade and the facade that's placed before us. Ends up being just the illusion of things. And we need to declare and find for ourselves what's reality as well. So that we have it's what we're defending. And I hope behind the woodshed we're bringing principles, the principles that we didn't get when we didn't get behind the woodshed because they made everything so simple and so nice. No important lessons were learned. There was understand that you're taking an action that becomes some wrong that needs to be made right by the one who sees that if you continue that course in life and you move that into life, you're going to run into some serious trouble that it's so severe that they took you behind the woodshed. Now, there's arguably there's ideas about maybe not having to do that, but this is just a metaphor, right? This is just an idea. How stern this is, what we have not been taught. that I'm saying we need to re-engage that in ourselves. We take ourselves behind the woodshed to learn the principles that someone didn't step up to teach us. Why? Because even our mothers and fathers were deceived. And their mothers and fathers were deceived. That getting to it now, I keep trying to show you the illusion, and it's not that you don't see some of this and all of it, even more what I even say myself, and you may be able to articulate it better, but it seems to me with the lack of action or in face of this really stupidity that we see, that they try to those people that are causing this try to pawn off on us, that we sit silent in it. I have to just take the attitude that maybe no one actually does see it until we have enough people that do see it, that do respond. In other words, even where the TSA checkpoints are missing 95% of the weapons and smuggling tests, still there is not an outcry, which was what I called on years ago, that the war of terror that the government's imposing on us is a facade. That I told you, when you look at and extend this over, as the first paragraph says, as has been the case since the agency's inception, its agents missed the overwhelming majority of red team attempts to smuggle weapons past its checkpoints 67 out of 70 times. To tell you that proves there are no terrorists trying to come into the country to hurt you. Because if there was 70 terrorists, you would have heard of 3 of them. And the rest would have killed somebody or destroyed something. That the silence on this joke, this facade, this crime, needs to stop. Someone needs to step up and address this whole thing. I remember telling you, and I don't think about this stuff before I start talking about it, all of a sudden, like Jesse Ventura, I told you he was in the right position. He tried to champion whether or not it was just a show, like worldwide wrestling or whatever the heck that was. The show, the escapades. He was given he took the opportunity and was right there to make the change, and he didn't. Instead, he ran away. The big bad Navy SEAL that he is. To be able to challenge this very point, that this proves there is no terror unless it's the one being waged against you by the United States government. Touching on last week's discussion, pointing out that the unqualified one, this plundering President Obama, he stated that we're at peace. There's no war, actually, what he said, right? Well, interestingly, the following week, a little thing comes up I found very interesting. Here's how much of your life in the United States has been at your war. How long have you been living in war by your life? And it was an interesting chart, but I was only interested in the very last line, because the very last line is 2014. And I'm kind of clicking down through it. Interesting graph on how old or old you are when you were born, how much of your life was war. And where the unqualified one said that we are now living in a time of no war, I see a little red line. Therefore, someone born in 2014 has been living in war. But this quickly shows us this guy, this plunderer in chief, again, if you haven't been able to know it or see it, is a liar. And he's willing to lie to you to advance whatever it is, and we're going to try and get to a little bit of that. And I hope I can go pretty quick. There's a lot to cover today. I'm going to make some dot connections. You may or may not believe them. You may or may not agree. You may or may not have ever thought about it. You may or not ever thought of it to the point that when I talk about it, you'll be confused. I don't know, but I'm going to make them for the record. And I hope I get through them. As you know, I always got lots and too much stuff to talk about. That you have to see a bunch of connections going on. As we've noticed this, as I told you, the NDAA, the lack of just the declaration right after Battlefield America really kind of culminates all the things I could say about that you're living in this war, even in the United States, that the officers of this government, so-called, however you want to define it, those that purport to be officers with an oath to protect from domestic or foreign enemies, have failed when the battlefield became America. And I hear crickets. that you have to understand for those, and I'm talking, I know I keep listening to myself talking who I'm talking to. I know most of you know this, but I want to tie the dots. Why? Because I want you to tie the dots, because when you're talking to people or you hold a position and you want to go address some of the wrongs you see out there, you can get past and through these, and you can understand the technique that's being used against the people that you're talking to that don't quite understand what you're saying when you're saying, hey, there's a real big wrong and it's right here, and they can't see it. You are going to have to figure out ways to educate that point, and you can't do it from your opinion. I'm just going to tell you that from experiential experience. That's why we went to the black and white. That's what I've been talking about, the black and white. It's the only objective basis we have. What's written before us that everyone understands as we call law is what you use, because then nobody, not even the so-called lawyers, the attorneys, the occupier, can defeat it. And then you'll find out how little they actually know as well. And with respect to the conversation before and JJ's broadcast, and thank you very much for coming back online, JJ, and bringing your guest. And I understand maybe that guest is going to be another host, and sounds pretty consistent with what we've been talking. Miners threw lawyers out of their camps all the time. I find it very interesting. Jefferson Mining District sued the Bar Association, essentially throwing them out of our camp. Now we've got to do the cleanup. That's a little bit more delicate, as I was talking to the people in the chat room at UCY. There is a method, and there's a strategy and tactics, and then there's the enforcement, and all that is you're in a very trepidatious period when you find out you're an occupied country. I won't agree with one of the chatters and that said we're conquered. I don't agree with that. That means you've given up. I do not agree with that. Just alter that to being occupied, and then go throw the bums out. It'll take a bit, but I think we can do it. I think there's enough of us to do that. That we listen, and I've been telling you, we also sued the political parties, which means I was telling you that we have now fact in law by default judge. They didn't even come to the court. We sued the Bar Association. They didn't even come to their own court to defend themselves. How bad it is we expose the tyranny, the literal treason. They didn't dare answer and put that on the record. But default judgment for us is good enough. It's been over a year. That's settled. They can't come back and show any problem. That I told you, be cautious on any affiliations with party affiliations. We've said this a long time ago. And again, to date this, 2013 is when we sued them, to tell you that I fully understood this condition way back when, enough to go feel bold enough, if we can call it bold. Really, I'm just trying to get us back, at least for me and the people around me, trying to get us back to a place when law meant something. Well, where is the law, folks? When the legal isn't law, where's the law? And if I didn't know better, I'm told it's in the people, and individually so. And how do I know that? Well, I go to the state statute. However you want to define that state, even if it's a corporate state, I understand it. I've told you, I've done all the reading, and I know about that. I know exactly when it happened and how. I know who done it. That's why we sued it. That I'm told that we have, as people, private right of arrest, complaint and arrest. That if a bunch of us were to start really figuring this out, we have the ability in our hands right now, in our states, to do what we need to do where the system failed. Why? Because it's the occupier. And we start outing the occupier. But getting back to the political parties, we sued the political parties at the same time we sued the bar, and we outed them for being the same, causing the same treason, or sedition, or whatever. You can put all these kinds of names. It all depends on what elements you want to bring. The list is longer than your arm. The crimes that government does, so-called, this framework that we've built in order to help protect us, that has now gone bad. It sits there to. Again, its framework is in stone, if you can say it that way. It's in parchment. That is trespass that we can identify. It's not my opinion. It's the fact. That you see that the political parties have been a scourge. And hat tip again with the JJ as to William Roberts, become vocal local. He was on this as well. The political parties, he was going to use Roberts' rules of order in order to destroy the political parties locally. Have any of you stepped up to do that? It'd be a valiant and heroic. I mean, the way this occupier is, it'd be a heroic attempt. And I don't think it's an attempt. If you do it right, you're going to accomplish it. That's the whole point about that. But he was onto this problem with the political parties. So you can't expect these political parties to do anything. Now, what I say, you communicate with them. Why? Because you're making records. Now, I don't mean that idly. I don't mean, you just write a letter to make a record. No, you should have been writing that letter because you set out to you have a plan. You have your plan. And you're making records so that when people inquire into what you've done, you can prove it by an evidence trail. That's the same, no different the way you apply it as I talk with you about administrative things such as code violations of any nature, federal or state. That we moved into hearing that the Patriot Act was going to be, defanged a bit. Well, within the last week, up comes, and you have to understand, this is supposed to, the Republicans were supposed to be the ones that were standing up for right and standing up for what you think, isn't liberal leftist, I guess is that the other way we can say it, but my observation is neutral to all that. They're all criminals, so I look at it a little bit differently. And I know that they're criminals because they've admitted to it in our court case. So this is beyond opinion for me as well. I have black and white. You may not, I do. I set out to get this. You can too for your own. In fact, it's coming up relevant now in every local government. If you were just to step in and understand what you're looking at there and see the occupier working at 3 different levels, they're working at 3 different levels, you can interrupt that and stop it. All by yourself. Well, with the help of one who understands and the law, you can stop this nonsense. And you can make the record for yourself. And you take it out of opinion. You take it out of the realm of what everyone types on the computers and puts in the chats and everything they think is law, that they think that works, or they think that doesn't work, that you know better. You need to put yourself in that capacity. That the U.S. Freedom Act was passed. This is the act that was promoted to help us. It was going to stop the surveillance. It was going to defang the Patriot Act. The U.S. Freedom Act was passed by the Senate. It's been controlled by the party called the Republicans. So any of you all that were voting Republican by party, thinking that, now we've got control of the Congress, that we're going to know hallelujah, you really need to take another look. That is what this U.S. Freedom Act is. And I was going to bring it up, but it was done, I think, on Freaker's Ball. What freedom means? Freedom. It's not freedom. It means something else. I'm not going to go through it. I think it's a waste of time. At some point, you can find it. If you want to know about it, you need to find it. You need to know how they lied to you, because what they said in there is that they were going to stop the surveillance at some point. And when you look at the text, it doesn't. In fact, it privatizes data collection. It does not stop it. And what's fascinating is that how this thing is promoted. And so here's a discussion I just found. Just pull it out. Just go on the internet and you can find this stuff out for yourself. And I ask you to do that so that you have an internal knowledge, not just an opinion, a feeling, or a belief. Written here. It's not all good news, however, this act, this so-called Freedom Act. However, as a provision, as other provisions that had lapsed with the 215 section of the Patriot Act, 215 will be revived just as they were prior to the expiration on Sunday night of the Patriot Act sections. The reinstatement of the roving wiretap and lone underwolf, that's those of us that are the black sheep, that are actually the wolves in black sheep clothing. The lone wolf sections of the bill will give local and federal law enforcement full permission. Local and federal law enforcement full permission to track the activities and tap the devices of individual citizens at their discretion. I don't think this means citizen. At the law enforcer, at the military discretion. Even if the target in question has never showcased links to any known terrorist organization before being tracked. And what is that telling you? Let's go back to Battlefield America. You are deemed and presumed an enemy combatant. That's why. Been talking about this for years, and more particularly about the NDAA. The president himself must be the unqualified one, I suppose. Still spoke optimistically about the passage of the bill, taking to Twitter to let the world know that he was, quote, glad the Senate finally passed the USA Freedom Act. Again, if we say it as words, these are acronyms for different words. that when you go read that, it's even a lie. It protects civil liberties and our national security. I'll sign it as soon as I get it. Well, when you live under NDAA without constitutional protection in battlefield America, where we went extrajudicial, guess what? It protects civil liberties and our national security because you don't have any civil liberties. And it's all about national, or now as they're doing it, agenda, their outcome, security. Security to them. And I'm going to use this word security. I'm going to say it up front before we get to it, just so, because I want you to understand what they're doing here in different words. Let's throw in the obscure word, the kind of the out there, the word you hear a lot of, but you can't quite place. The term is resilient for security. In this case, in the form, it would be resiliency. National resiliency. Now understand that national has now been the occupied territory. Resiliency of that territory, just what the Lieber Code says. It's everything and all to protect and secure that occupied nature. Another report. Senate passes bill to privatize surveillance. This was the switch. This is where you see Google now becoming where this is where all these Facebook, all these people now are seen to be where they were with the disclosure that they've been in on it. This gets us back to what I started to read. I read through at least the parts that were understandable without all the graphs, silent weapons and quiet wars. Big data, folks. This is how they're surveilling you, and it's all about how they use this data to control your life. What is this? This is not national. This is international. The Senate bill that we just were talking about here, the so-called Freedom Act, bill privatizes surveillance. Telcos are to act as an arm of law enforcement and collect, store for United States government all this information, and Congress approves the bill, which resumes, folks. See, they said it went away, but it just resumes. This new bill is not what it's been promoted on. And so this starts a domino effect of understanding in the dots I've been wanting to connect. And kind of for me, maybe not for you, but for me, confirms and settles for me at least the things that I kept in the category of a question that I'm going to lock in a lot tighter to fact as to my observation as to questions. And as we're moving along here in these stories, it was very interesting on what comes out and who pops out. That reading the words and having an understanding of terms really starts to develop a picture, a condition inside of a condition. That is always the way this works. And that's why I've been kind of focused a bit to caution you to make sure you understand when you see a term, a word, they call it a word. We call it a word illegal. It's a term. It could have another meaning. Black could be white. And you got to know the context and its use. That you need to start having that awareness. That what they did was shift and reformed. I'll tell you, it's called reform. They reformed the Patriot Act, but it wasn't the way it was promoted, and it's not the way it's promoted by people that didn't surprise me that were promoting it, that I've always had a question, but now I'm much more certain that these people that we have been putting up at hero status are in on it. This whole thing was done by the political parties in order to empower the government, empower the state, empower the capacity of the government to further where the plan is going. And we can go to the international plan, and we're going to get to something called, again, sustainable development that was brought in, I think, by a Democrat. I think it was brought in by Clinton and then promoted by Bush Sr. Sustainable development is very serious. You need to understand the ramification of it. We sued sustainable development to enjoin it. So we are on record, and we have a lawful default judgment against all these people about implementing this. But as I said, it's very delicate to deal with an occupier in a system that's been going on for a century, that is so well ingrained and so deep and so wide and so ignorant in the populace. I'm actually having more trouble in how do we present to the population, the people, so that they get it, they understand what they're looking at, though they don't understand that. To get the point, so that they hopefully get righteously indignant to want to, do more than just kind of shake their keyboards at something. But in the process, we also get notice where the NSA has been doing this, and now they're going to privatize it, we also get notice now there's another organization, even more deep, about this surveillance issue, which starts to bring up, and I bring it in here, not necessarily to identify these government security groups, but they start to make, the people that are writing start make referencing, and we start to broaden the horizon of the problem. Meet the NSAC, the United States government's shadow spy agency. The National Security Analyst Center, NSAC, was exposed here. I think it's Zero Hedge, right? That there's a whole other organization, and the purpose is for monitoring the electronic footprints of terrorists and their supporters. See, and their supporters has really never been defined nor limited, so this becomes the very other problem. Identifying their behaviors and providing actionable intelligence. Behaviors is very serious connection that we're going to start to move on into now in relation to sustainable development and the lack of conformity of definite definition in what the term their supporters means when you look at the context of Battlefield America. It's actually Battlefield World, as we all can tell as well. We don't have to limit this, but for our purposes, the United States of America, I'd like it to limit it to us because we were supposed to be that beacon, that shining star, that white knight in the world. Now the wraps are off. And again, it's up to us to decide: do we just succumb to it, or do we rally up against it? That, in some regard, for national security purposes, I'm not a neophyte. I brought the geopolitical problem we have with other countries, where you have other countries like China saying that they want to stretch their legs into another place, and they name the continents. Now, whether or not they're going to do that physically or economically or whatever, I don't know. That's a long-term thing. You got to look at all that. And I'm sure, let's say China has been doing its bit about that. But, we allowed it as the country of the United States of America because we went on a lie. We started publishing or allowing these so-called derivatives and expansion of gobzillions. And they were sitting there as a producer for the consumer, the consumption of a public, of the products of our consumption, and they just took on this evidence of debt, and they built their coffers to $3 trillion. And I said it that when you saw that coming, no different than what happened in Japan in the 80s when that bubble burst. China was going to come back to redeem those debt notes for something of substance in the United States of America. Then all so-called patriots got all upset when that started happening. Think about the $3 trillion they're sitting on that we owe them as a nation on your back, and you said nothing. Cricket. But now you complain they're coming back to get something of value? Now, do they have the economic control? I'm not so sure. All in the right place. Anyone wants to say they have the land. I really, by land law and soil disposition and rights and the rights in the government to do so, they have no right to do that anyway. They'll have to come and get our industry, which Japan did. But so I don't have a problem because of the potential and real threats of nations wanting to go beat up each other, because as Cain killed Abel, nations are just an extension of Cain and Abel. They'll go and kill each other. We aren't so cool amongst ourselves. In fact, going through this life, that'll be one of it's like this thing that just sits on my head. What a screwed up place. This is the best that we could have done? This is the best that was allowed to us? It wasn't, so let's not go put it anywhere else. Let's not do what the Forest Service does and blames their mismanagement for act of God, conflagration, and catastrophe. But we could have certainly done a lot better, even with this negative spirit in us. So that we have to have a protection as a nation, and this National Security Analyst Center seems to be really more relevant to what that was supposed to be, what we thought the CIA and the NSA was. So I wasn't too interested about that, but they make a comment in this report here. And they said, just when you thought you knew what the government spy state was up to, thanks to Ed Snowden's heroics, along comes the National Security and Analyst Center. And so I noticed as the news notice to us went on this week, from the Patriot Act is done, we're free at last, oh, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. The Freedom Act says not so quickly, and we're going to privatize it. Let me get into the point of the term. relating to sustainable development. And that little term I just brought up called security that I altered for you and said, hold out a conversation that says that resilience is actually what we're talking about, that we're looking at the notice to you that this entire thing is moving into the international sphere, but not in the way of the UN, but the tool that the UN is creating. So you got to hold these ideas that we're connecting now as we move through. But Ed Snowden again recognizes hero. And I've told you I have a problem with a lot of what's there. I can't prove much of any of it. There's just something that isn't right, and there's a lot of facts that haven't been built up quite right that don't make sense. That now we start seeing language that's now being advanced, like things like behavior and things like their supporters. As in a distinct difference than the organizational system that's involved, and that its behavior-oriented is outcome-based, tying us into that sustainable development concept. That Ed Snowden is being, again, now comes up in the news. It says, here you are, this is the guy that outed it. Well, he never outed all that. I mean, myself and Will Roberts and Vicki Davis and I wish I could remember her name to give her real kudos here. I can't remember her name. We were just talking to her about her last week, talking about the water, she's now promoting the prime water stuff, but really doing the deep research about how this works. We have been here telling you about this so-called deep state problem. That the so-called disclosure of the NSA is just the outflow of the eventuality. Again, silent weapons for quiet wars, the digital leash, the digital control, the digital world, the financial construct, all under somebody else making policies and regulations and codes to drive your behavior. It's all starting to show up in this article, pointing now to Ed Snowden being a hero in bringing this along. Another story came out. Congress passes NSA surveillance reform in vindication for Snowden. But what actually happened? Was this a vindication for Snowden? And if it is, what happened says the vindication for Snowden is different than we've perceived it. Where they didn't actually get rid of surveillance and only privatized it, and as I was, the term I was getting to in sustainable development is public-private partnerships. Public-private partnership. They privatized this data collection for crime on presumed enemy combatants to the state. Did they really vindicate Snowden? Well, on our perception of the relief from surveillance, they couldn't. But what if I was to suggest the thing that's been lingering in my mind, and I'd said it early on, this is a Snowden, this is a snow job. I said this early on, the first week it came out. I have serious reservations about all this that's going down. What if what he was set up to do was to actually, as I said, broach the concept, get it into the public sphere so that then it would be forgotten? Because that's another technique and it works really well. That when you read that headline that Congress passes the NSA surveillance, which did privatize and create a even more hidden system of everywhere that you will go digitally. And if since that is what they did, is now announced as a vindication of Snowden, that title just told you what I was concerned about he was actually doing. What I find, again, the connection, the coincidence. Is it real? Does it mean something? Does this coincidence that Ed Snowden is now being recognized? It was like one other story here. The elephant, I'll get to the next one. The elephant in the room was Ed Snowden. All of a sudden, he becomes prominent. This becomes a promotion to me when I see it. When you start looking and analyzing with trying to figure out really what's the reality here, it's not looking so good, at least to me. You can have a different flavor. You can have a different opinion. You can have a different belief. You can have a different set of facts that come to a different result. This is how it strikes me. And I do that for me because I'm trying to protect me. And hopefully, if I'm correct, I'm protecting lots of other people. The passage of the USA Freedom Act, so-called, again, it's not the acronym, it's just they want to call like it's the Freedom Act, paves the way for telecom companies to assume responsibility of controversial phone records collection program while also bringing to a close the short lapse in the broad NSA, FBI, domestic spying authorities. Again, saying there was a lapse, but a reinstitution. Right there, it tells you there is nothing changed between last week we talked and this week with the reinstitution, with the lapse now being fixed. It's now empowered. The powers expired with the key provisions. The surveillance powers expired with the provisions of the Patriot Act on 12:01 a.m. on Monday amid a showdown between defense hawks and civil liberties advocates. But was it, folks? This is just, again, what they're telling us. And then listen to the players. Remember, the Bar Association comes in here now to applaud this increased style of surveillance in more places that you will have contact with. The American Civil Liberties Union praised the passage of the USA Freedom Act as a milestone. Now, you understand the American Civil Liberties Union has been typically on the side of, if I can say, socialist or Marxist bent, notwithstanding that their members are, for the most part, American Bar Association members that have committed to sustainable development over everything else. Start connecting this, that this American Civil Liberties Union is calling this a milestone. And then, if that's the case, and it increased surveillance, what side are these people on? This is the most important surveillance reform bill since 1978, as it's reported. As I said before, they reform what was before into something new, better, and in the purpose of the original. It's not reconstructed. It's not created from origins. It's some piece of clay that existed before that is simply pushed into new shapes. And what shapes are they pushing into it? The shape that will be the most transparent to your perception. So consistent with this going on, this passage and this change, we see Snowden now, he's taking more and more calling. And it's very interesting. Only one word, it makes the connection for me as we move on. Another report, the elephant in the room, senators finally credit Edward Snowden for role in Patriot Act reforms. Not destruction. Reforms. Here's what this process does. They find out what you know. That's why we don't tell them everything we know. They find out what you know and your capacity to understand new information to know different. And they extrapolate that out, and then they evaluate when they monitor you on that, they evaluate what you gave them by your response or lack of response, and then they adapt, reform what they had so it's more transparent to you. You don't see it. This doesn't say the Patriot Act was eliminated and something new was better coming in. They just took the old and made it they reformed it to make it look more appetizing for your consumption. The elephant in the room, senators finally credit Edward Snowden, like, oh, that was a big deal. Oh, this is a big concession that the political parties give over to Ed Snowden. This heroic act to make less surveillance, when in fact everything they're doing caused more and more comprehensive. That we then, see the fruition of a bill coming through. Once the Senate agreed, it was on the heels of what the Republican Congress did, Obama signs the bill to resume overhaul of NSA surveillance, which we now, in the previous stories, understand to be nothing more than increased surveillance from more places, and public and private. By definition, the implementation of sustainable development, or what we'll hear is another word of corporate governance. Let's not get lost in the USA as a corporation. We're talking global here. The United States is a nothing compared to this. United States, you'll see, is going to be run as a corporation outside of the government underneath this. So Obama is all with this. He immediately signs to overhaul. Not an overhaul, it's a reformation. Let me put another word in now. How about the word that you hear all the time called transformation? That's more particularly speaking to moving something into the new paradigm that they're going to expect and control your behavior to accept. Obama signs a bill to resume. That doesn't sound like anything really ended, does it? Resuming, when you have a play, when you have something going on in a video on your monitor, and you hit pause, and then it says resume. When you hit resume, is it different? Or does it just continue? This is the interesting little, and this is coming from all different sources. When you get to the blogcast, you see it for yourself. I mean, it's all different sources are speaking in all the same language, all in their part, bringing a little bit more of the picture to bear. The focal point now being, apparently, the thing that everybody was denying, excuse me, everybody was denying, which was the heroic efforts of Snowden, just in time to say he did something heroic, when in fact it was just a bit part in the overall scheme and artifice. That as soon as that story comes out about overhauling to resume the surveillance that we now see is expanded, another report comes in right after that, says NSA, if you don't think that this is serious stuff, and let me jump into, go back, I'm trying to move your mind back and forth with terms, but keep the connection. The dots that are connected. Go back to sustainable development. Whether or not I've said it behind the woodshed, if you've paid attention and were listening, or you maybe past you because you got other things you're doing, I don't know. But here, let me remind you: the sustainable development is pretty comprehensive in every aspect of your life. We talked about food security and medical security and all this other stuff. We get to the medical. I told you Obama's scare was the implementation of a corporate monopoly for you being under your care being now put into the government. That this surveillance, as we heard a little bit of it going into the Obama scare, went through IRS. I told you they're deeming you to be residents or businesses, commerce entities that they're dealing with, that the IRS was involved in that, that your information's not private, that ended that. You're not a private entity at all when you get involved with this digital stuff, that the surveillance over that's going to be complete, that we now hear the NSA, right after this law comes in, that we hear now NSA makes medical intelligence operations a priority. And yet another worrying sign that the U.S. National Security Agency has completely gone off its rails. See, that's from our perspective, not from these lunatics' perspective of control. It certainly have not gone off the rails. We should have jacked them off the rails. We should have put a big penny in their way to knock them off the rails. We should have ran over to the switch yard and switched them off the trails. But we've done nothing, and so they continue. See, we're cricket. Crickets don't go and do this stuff. And now we're finding out they're not even protein quality enough to even be Soylent Green. As of June of 2010, this has been going on. There was a presentation made that the medical pattern of life targeting high-value individual number 1, subtitle SIGINT, signals intelligence, enabling human intelligence targeting, describes how NSA is using medical intelligence to target medical patients. If you didn't understand what this all comes down to when Battlefield America comes into every life, as a death, it's a dead entity they're dealing with. They're using this intelligence on a medical level to target people. Well, for what? Probably assassination. How about the end of your life care? The NSA and all this intelligence that they're using is being gleaned, as I said, that the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars document explained, that I read right after NDAA Battlefield America, was a certainty. That this surveillance isn't just the stuff you put on your iPhone, or it might be. Apple gives you a nice little heart monitor and all that. Where do you think all that information is going? respiration rates, all this electronic gear you wear, these wearable things. In the context of all this data going out about particular things, people they can identify, knowing that the NSA has now taken medical intelligence as a priority, in light of all the enemy combatants out there and the prioritized targets that will cause the most trouble and create the most instability to this new agenda, the New World Order they call it, to the sustainable development underneath an austere, controlled, contrived existence. We are now of notice that the NSA is working on you by your medical needs. By using medical information and target patients for either surveillance or assassination, NSA is on shaky ground with regard to abiding by the Privacy and Data Protection Acts of dozens of nations, as well as international law on human rights and warfare. I want to remember here on human rights, because if I get there, a report about your so-called human rights before the European courts. You need to keep this stuff really understood about how this is all being worked. This is a discussion that thinks that you have rights. I entered into the broadcast saying you have no civil rights. And those civil rights that you have, what are they, folks? Forgot to mention that part. Those are found at Title 42 United States Code, Title 42, Section 1981. And what is that for those of you that have been behind the woodshed and learning your lessons? But to pay exactions of every kind and no other, including pains, punishments, penalties, fees, fines, taxes, and exactions, extortions of every kind and no other. That's your civil rights that he's talking about that you still have. Not your civil rights that you thought you had. This is the world you don't understand. You've been put into a simple little bucket, and you're the one crab trying to crawl out, and you just got your little footy grabbed up and tugged you back in. You didn't even understand how that happened. Thereafter, this medical intelligence is now, all of a sudden, right after this bill becomes important. The coincidence I'm suggesting to you is important, whether or not I see the totality of it or whether I can actually prove that it's the priority that I think it is, or that this article, this author is talking to. You have to make that decision. I need you to know this is what's going on right at the same time. That Snowden is being promoted as a hero. And you think it was contrary to be against exposing this surveillance, and that they are acting with that knowledge to curtail surveillance. There's no evidence that that happened at all. And Snowden is still put up on a pedestal. And interestingly, a day after they signed this law into law, and this is to me this is important. I don't know for you all, but to me this timing is also, chronology is very important. In fact, I'll tell you, as I mentioned before, we beat a patent case where Ryobi stole from my friend a patent that he had done, and they falsified records. And the attorney told us, you can't win this. What won that? We did win that. What won it was setting things up in a chronological order, detailing a chronological order of events, exposed where it could not be exposed, keeping track of the chronology, exposed something critical to proving that Ryobi had in fact created and fabricated and stolen a patent. It was a simple chronological examination that we didn't see until I asked my friend, listen, I need you to lay everything out that happened exactly in time. And I went after he wrote it up, and it was over a year of data I'm looking at. I got down to 1 month in a 2-week span, and I said, wow, we have an anomaly here that exposes a very serious defect that you can't see when you look at the whole year and just talk about it in your mind. That I'm trying to point out here in the chronology of the news, I think it's important. I found importance in it. That right after that bill's passed, with all this hoopla and heroic discussion and pedestal building for Snowden, he comes out and says, the world says no to surveillance. My response to a Twitter on that was, not according to Congress. But my view now looks at Snowden even more. And I'm reading an article, pretty interesting. Listen, the guy's intelligent. In fact, he's almost too intelligent, it seems, now that I see this. He's on an inside group of control, and this is scary in a way because I know where that's going, and we've been in the trenches of this for 10 years, literally, finding it out, outing it, interfering with it, overcoming it, prevailing against it. And this is just coming in a different way over a different time frame. That's part of the other thing that keeps me watching this. That he comes out the day later and says the world says no to surveillance. Well, on the surface, that's the truth. And on the surface, a lot of what he says in this article that was written in the New York Times think about this, folks. This guy's got coverage in the New York Times, of all places, with this little article he wrote. The day after, we are now finding out the bill passes to resume the Patriot Act on steroids. And I don't have time to read it. You really need to read it. And to me, I read it because I'm looking for hints. And there's I'm reading this on two levels. One is what he's saying, and it looks good enough. I mean, he's talking fair enough. We don't like this stuff. We do want it stopped. It does mean that we're maybe stepping up to become more aware to it. All these things are correct. And then he gets down to something. I go on and read, and then he makes a statement. Now, I'm going to not say it, but I want you to remember, what word did I tell you to substitute for security? And let me read this. He's talking and writing. He's authoring this whole entire bit, and he says, yet, and I know I'm not giving you a context. That's why I ask you to go back to the blogcaster and read it for yourself. But this was important to me, and I don't have a lot of time to explain it, so I'm just going to go this far, read this part of the paragraph. Like I said, trust me enough to put you on the trail. What you find may be different than what I found, but I found something. I found it important enough to come to tell you about it. And if you put yourself on that trail, or want to see that trail, I'll put you there, and you go down and keep in mind what I found, and go look for your own stuff. But we are here at this point where he writes, yet the balance of power is beginning to shift. Folks, the power in the United States is supposed to be in the people. It's not a balance. But I don't want to even analyze that. I'm going to get off point. It's so easy to start seeing these things. But this is his opinion. This is some guy supposedly did this for you Americans. In light of the truth, the fact, and the reality that it hasn't gone anywhere where he exposed it. In fact, it's gone deeper. Yet the balance of power is beginning to shift. We are witnessing the emergence of a post-terror generation, one that rejects the worldview defined by a singular tragedy. For the first time since the attacks of September 11, 2001, we see the outline of a politics that turns away from reaction and fear in favor of resilience and reason. Now, that's right near the end of his authorship. It's the last paragraph. I could discuss this quite a bit. Understand the term worldview. This is very serious observation at this point. The United States is not interested in that worldview for itself. It might be true that we were all focused on a singular tragedy. But remember the invocation. Remember what the programming does, the invocation of 911. It was really the war of terror that brings all this on, not actually that attack. And it's the war of terror that we're living in, not the war on terror, which is non-existent. We proved that with the fact that 67 out of 70 weapons sneak through, which means that there's no terrorists coming in with weapons. Otherwise, 67 of them would have been through when 70 of them arrived. I want to now focus, we could talk about this, but look at the imagery that's in this last closing paragraph. But let's go to the one word I told you about. He brings up, and he also goes to politics, and this brings up whole lots of discussion I just don't have time for. We turn away from reaction and fear. And another thing, is this post-terror? No, we're right in it. They're still using it. So this is not post-terror. This is his promotion of something that doesn't exist to try and get you to think it's not viable, to say that the day after increased surveillance happened in a battlefield America, that we're past that. Like Obama's trying to promote we aren't in any wars. And I just got a proof of a chart that says anybody born in 2014 certainly was in a war time. Let's go back to the important part that I want to kick us on in over to what I've been really concerned about that seems for me to prove this out. This word resilience in this statement seems to me so out of place. And then knowing the context of the word and reason, I know that doesn't mean in the international sense, it doesn't mean your reason. It means the reason that has control. And that reason that has control, or gaining control, it has a pretty substantial control, is not yours. It's foreign to you. That he brings up this resilience was the trigger word for me. And it is because it's so prominent in what we're fighting up against, that most people that are not engaged may not understand it. I'm talking engaged in trying to assert something in the subject matter area. The politics that turns away from reaction and fear. Folks, this is all politics of reaction and fear, isn't it? In fact, continuing a war of terror on its own public. That's terrorism by every definition. By the government itself I don't even know where to go with that violation. Done by political parties and the influence on those. But then he says that we're turning away from reactions and fear in favor of resilience and reason. Folks, put yourself there. Are you turning, even if you weren't in fear, like myself, I'm not in fear. This is all the only thing I'm fearful of that not enough people that everyone remains crickets. That's what I'm a fear of, if I have a fear. It's just going to be a reality. There's not much I'm going to do about that. But when you think about this thing, in context of the 911 and all where we're at and 10, 15 years later and all this nonsense and then surveillance, does your mind turn to the terms resilience and reason? No, mine didn't. I don't know about you all, but mine didn't. But I know resilience is an important international term. And where did we hear a bit about that? Where do we hear about that? Let me return you back to this thing that we talked about with the Vatican, where the Pope is going to come up with an encyclical that he's going to now promote or come up with in September. They're going to have this big push on climate change and the common good. Common is, you might as well just read that straight up as being a communist and in the context of political communism, not commune, living togetherism. That there was a passage that they said it's from a brief written by the Pontifical Academy of Science. I'll tell you about the Green Pope and this political agenda that's not religion, that is a religion. The confusion that they create about all this. The Pontifical Academy of Sciences and the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences. Did you even know this stuff exists? But here it is. They had a brief excerpt that they had printed in this article. Unsustainable consumption. Tell me what the Vatican's talking about this stuff for. But here it is. Unsustainable consumption coupled with a record human population and the uses of inappropriate technologies are causally linked with the destruction of the world's sustainability and resilience. Sustainability and resilience. Those of you who would follow the Behind the Woodshed, you go to Blogcast and you read, when I tell you read this stuff, it's important. And just try to get that stuff in your eyes. I know some of this stuff doesn't seem like a lot. And I know it seems like it's such a stretch, maybe. I'm going to suggest to you, in my experience, this is not at all a stretch. That Snowden used this obscure word of resilience in the face of what they're looking at when it was a lie on top of it. That whole last paragraph is pushing an ideology. And I'll even say that he may not even be aware of it, but it's there anyway because of why? His upbringing. Your Common Core, your defunct education system could do this. Your social response, your peer pressure. But I think not. The guy's not the guy's intelligent. Please do not confuse that I don't think the guy's intelligent. All these people are seriously intelligent. And we just happen to have other things to do that we just kind of slips under our observation because we think everything's going hunky-dory and we got, this is all right. But returning to this is a statement from the Vatican and the Green Pope's instrumentalities. that they're focused on sustainability and resilience. Why did coincidentally Snowden uses that word? Well, what's this sustainability and resilience? As I connect the dots, I connected this whole thing up for you till now. What is this sustainability and resilience? It's a term. Sustainability and resilience. It's a conjunctive term on top of that. And it's very important to what we do and what we address with the so-called sustainable development, which other people may know as climate change, all the subparts, Agenda 21, food security, housing security, all these nonsenses. Securities. As I told you, take security and transfer it to the word resilience. Is your mind connecting these up for yourself? How integrated this whole process has been? How they tell you, they promote nothing, we have heroes, hero worship that's going on, they state something happened that actually didn't. All the while, they're bringing on the very thing that they claim was the hero defeated. Talk about inverted archetypes. This is just fascinating. It really is a study of, it's fascinating. It really is. But coming right out of the Vatican about climate change and the common good, that's the global climate good, sustainability and resilience. What is this thing called resilience? And why is it tied to sustainable development? What is resilience? And so you can do the check. I did the check. You can do the check. I'll have some links for you to get you there quicker if you don't want to type in sustainability and resilience. But just for the sake of the broadcast, moving beyond sustainable development was something that I found when I typed in resilience on the Wikipedia. Now I understand it's not the most best place to find information, but let me tell you something. It's a very good place to find information when you are the mouthpiece for the plunderers. They tell you everything they do, and it's pretty accurate. And I'm going to read off some things here, and you need to listen to what I was saying. Remember, I've likened this thing to an amoeba. If you put a pin in front of an amoeba, the amoeba will simply identify the pin, barely touches it. I don't know if you've looked in a microscope. It's kind of fun to watch. They kind of lean up into an object, and then they back off a little bit, and they somehow, one cell, it decides. For those of you that only have two brain cells to rub together, you're twice as intelligent as this. That an amoeba can go up to an obstruction. It'll back up, and it'll decide to go one way or the other around it, or go the other way. It will, like an octopus, finds itself in a confined space. It does what? It adapts its shape. So let's add this concept of adapt. Because this is what these methodologies are. They're watching, as I told you, they do the monitoring, evaluation, and then they adapt to what they find to do what? Reform what they're doing to make it more transparent to you. And guess where we see all this discussed? Right here, and not all of it, but I mean, as a form, a short form, summary for y'all. I went to the resilience, it's right in the Wikipedia, right here, and I backed it up. I got some more links so we can prove it's not just these wrong stating Wikipedia. Burks and Folk table a set of principles to assist with, quote, building resilience and sustainability, which consolidate approaches of adaptive management. This resilience and sustainability is all around the concept of adaptive management. Now, what are you doing in adaptive management? But you're adapting to the condition. If you're an occupier, you manage your occupation in an adaptive way to the resistance that you get, so that essentially under international law, you don't piss off the natives. You come underneath their radar. They don't see you coming. You're transparent to them. And then when you've been there long enough, they never even question that you are not law. You're just force. It's all normal. Let me get back to the statement. Building resilience and sustainability. I know the order is reversed, but this is an article on resilience, which consolidate approaches, methods of adaptive management, local knowledge-based management practices, and conditions for institutional learning and self-organization. Institutional learning is what they do as they reorganize to readdress whatever obstruction they've met. And this is critical now as sustainable development has met with resistance on a global scale. Moreover, recently it has been suggested by Andre Ross that the concept of sustainable development is no longer adequate in assisting policy development fit for today's global challenges and objectives. That's us, folks. Global challenges is the resistance we're bringing to this against their objectives to overwhelm and occupy you. And sustainable development as a concept has failed on its own, that they're now having, that you're looking at them talking to themselves, that they have to bring on this concept of resilience. Now, survival, security of that is now connected inextricably to the process of the objective of sustainable development, which is actually corporate governance principles, not government. Ultimately, I kind of jumped the gun here. Just want to get to that point so I have something to tie it to for you. This is because this concept of the global challenges and objectives, which are not adequate, is because the concept of sustainable development is based on weak sustainability, which doesn't take account of the reality of the limits of Earth's resilience. Ross draws on the impact of climate change on the global agenda as a fundamental factor in the shifts toward ecological sustainability as an alternative approach to that of sustainable development. And you're watching them as they adapt to your resistance to this fraud that they're putting on the entirety of the world, that now somehow, as to me, an obscure word statement in context of his article that Snowden used. That when you find out that sustainability and the development and adaptive management, and they're required to monitor data and evaluate it and then become more adaptive to what they're seeing as the resistances, as they show us they're now solely in the green religion. That this data is all important so they can bring up their so-called best practices. You heard that word before in this little section. The best practices. That the sustainability is weak because it's based on what? A big fraud, and it's being found out. That we're having to shift into how to make more secure our position here. And that's what resilience is. Now bring that, and this is environmental resilience, and I don't talk about that as being the air you breathe in the trees. Environmental is a lot of words. It's any environment. Remember, the NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, has the word environment in it, but that word has a definition which is not written as a definition more than an explanation of how it treats environment, which is in two parts. The word environment under United States of America's National Environmental Protection Act, it breaks down the term environment into the natural environment and separately man's environment. So when we're talking environment, we're not just talking about the trees and the birds and the things. This is a social environment as well. This is a political environment. This is a financial environment. This is man's environment that's been pieced apart and wanting to be controlled by these people through things like tools like climate change, which we've been told is a religion. Again, this is a religion. So the theology you're seeing developed over this, and Snowden uses the word that they are using. Why would you now, as you see this, they're using this as resilience to protect the system. Why wouldn't he use that? We now are moving into, he's them talking to them. We're moving into resilience and reason. We're going to be found out. We're going to have to shore up things, and then we make it all, make this part transparent again, and we'll be able to move on as we adapt our management potential against those people that are literally clueless. They are the clueless. And that's a serious condition. I don't know how some of us, and I hope I did, I escaped some cluelessness. I don't know how you escape your cluelessness. It's boy, what a curse. But some of us can. It's just a matter of you got to drop the fact of being resistant to a question, I think. really do ask that question why and be ready for the answer, no matter how devastating it is. Let me move on to another document. Resilience and Sustainable Development. So he says resilience and reason. I'm going to tell you the reason they're doing this is sustainable development. His comment in his article, Sustainable Development, Resilience and Reason, is resilience and sustainable development. And another document you can find, I just looked this stuff up. Again, I don't look it up because I'm looking around for it. I know it exists. I don't know that this document exists. I know that the concept is out there to show you the proof. I'm just not thinking it's out there and looking. I know it's out there. But a long time ago, I realized I know what I'm looking at. I know what they're doing. I don't have to focus on it anymore. It's nothing to prove this. What it is, it's everything to stop it. At least for me. I've decided this is not the life and the world I want to live in. Someone else's reason, someone else's fraud for control, so they sit fat and happy as they steal from the wealthy people, not the wealthiest, of course, but the ones that are working to make their lives better. They steal from them to ostensibly give to those that are not capable or lesser able, or those they politically beat down to make it look like they are. That's a bigger crime. Not here for that today. Resilience and Sustainable Development, a document, I just found it, by Umberto Pisano. Theory of Resilience, Systems Thinking and Adaptive Governance. Now we see the governance, the corporate condition, the lack of government, the lack of property control, the lack of property. The mobile condition of governance. It's not steady. There's no constitution in any of this. There's no objective basis to go to some supposed official and say, hey, you're outside. Like I've been telling you, when someone comes against your property under color of authority, that's a felony theft by extortion. There isn't anything like that underneath adaptive governance. Because you are part of the governed. Those that are part of the system of being plundered. You're the host. Theory of Resilience, Systems Thinking. And that should fire up in those of you that have heard her, Channeling Reality with Vicki Davis. Systems Thinking. She's all over this. Maybe I think she knows it by now. She's all over this when her systems analyst training caused her to come to this issue here. That's all this is systems thinking, concepts, adaptive management to get their way, and that's transparent to you. Resilience and Sustainability in another document. I can go on and on, but let me bring up the governance connected to corporate status. And I don't mean that the government of the United States is a corporation. Forget that. It's irrelevant. We're talking about a whole other thing. It very well may be that when under Title 28, Title 28 USC 30,002 in financial matters, the United States is a corporation. Now, I tell you what isn't financial? Well, there are some things that are not financial. If you ask, soil disposal obligations are not financial. So there are some things that are not underneath this, where the United States is not a corporation. So in their corporate capacity, when you're doing on money, now we bring up the fiscal condition of the sustainable development, as I've been telling you, and now from there we could say the United States is a corporation, and how it is easy for them to do governance, all in the same breath of doing the so-called sovereign things. Resilience and Sustainability is put out by the OSU Education, and I don't know if this is Ohio or not. I can't remember if that's this one. I just picked these things off the internet that looked interesting, just to give you ideas to pull your term base together, to make a sharper point on what you're watching in all this so-called surveillance, as we tie it over to big data, as we tie that over to silent weapons of quiet wars and the need to monitor you, and you hand it to them. The concept of resilience, remember, I exchanged that for security. They're talking about themselves. Resilience provides a fresh and useful perspective on sustainable development. In other words, sustainable development has caused those challenges that is now defeating them. Now they're thinking about this, and they're going to now make papers on how to explain it. And what are we going to do about this, folks? Not us, them. About themselves. The notion that industrial development today must not jeopardize well-being of future generations. The notion. It's a concept. They'll get you to buy in. It's called public buy-in. When you consent, when you remain silent, you're buying in. It's that simple. Multinational corporations are under increasing pressure to couple economic growth with social responsibility, including respect for human rights and traditional cultures. Remember that human rights. I'm going to try and get to it. Very important for you to understand what's happening in the EU, a decision that was made over the so-called human rights. I've told you to be careful about those. You'll hear why. Likewise, they are expected to take greater responsibility for their ecological, quote, footprint, including reduction of toxic emissions and resource conservation. That's the antithesis of the public lands use, folks. Resource conservation. And we find out that when you do that, when you don't use your forest, they kill you. They burn up and they kill you. And they kill everything else. And they sterilize the land. But that's the plan of these insane people. The issues are often described as corporate sustainability. So there's your bringing in of this corporate, sustainable governance, this adaptive governance comes into corporate sustainability. How does the concept of resilience square with current definitions of sustainability? The Dow Jones Sustainability Index defines corporate sustainability as, quote, a business approach that creates long-term shareholder value. All of you all that have been involved with all these public comments or understanding about these stakeholder things, and listen to the shareholder value, and you hold that value in your mind when you go look at these public comments, and they'll talk about values. They're talking about the shareholder value, not yours, theirs. But shareholder value by embracing opportunities, you'll hear this word a lot, of managing risks, which is the risk of being found out, deriving from economic, environmental, and social developments, the three-legged stool of Agenda 21, and implementation of the Rio Accord. Economic, environmental, and social legs on the stool. There's actually four and five that I think they've added, or at least that I've identified that we can attack them on. The point is, it's right here. They're talking about this sustainable development on the international level. This language is very similar to the above definition of resilience. It's similar to the above definition of resilience. A business approach that creates long-term shareholder value by embracing opportunities, managing risks, and deriving from economic, environmental, and social development. That is a similar definition as resilience. In other words, it's just another repackaging of sustainable development. And the shareholder value is you in the communistic sense of being a host to the parasite, and you will provide, and you'll be trained to do this. You won't even have a resistance. You won't be resilient and resistant against this. You will be agreeable. You'll buy in, and you'll just if you're older than about 40, you won't, because you will be dead by the time this is really working. Those of you younger probably will. You will just give over to this thing. You think this is what you have to do. Your shareholder value is your part contribution to the commune. This language is very similar to the above definition of resilience. It suggests an adaptive approach. Suggests an adaptive report. That's adaptive management. Toward enterprise management. The whole system as a whole. One might argue that resilience provides an operational tool for recognizing, improving, and measuring corporate sustainability. Well, what is that? That's just monitoring, evaluating, and adapting. Measures is adaptation. It's rephrasing and repackaging sustainable development as resilience with a understanding the challenges that have been brought up against it. Well, who brought those challenges but people like you and people like me? And not letting up. We're not letting it up, and I had to turn my whole life into doing this. We happened to go through the mining law, but we found the same problem as I told you. That once you get in this, you'll find that you're going to find yourself through the trails. You walk through the trail, you're all going to be finding yourself standing at the edge of a stinking abyss, shoulder to shoulder with other people who took the time and importance and dedication and commitment to do so. You're looking at the same stinking abyss, and when you get there, you'll know that one or two witnesses makes the fact. It's not you. It's not your opinion. It's not your fantasy. It's not your paranoia. This thing exists. William Roberts and I came to standing shoulder and shoulder of that stinking abyss where he came through the Agenda 21 literally right from the pages, and I came through international law following the terminology that I'm talking to you today. that allows me to tie Snowden with his reference to resilience and reason right on into what we're doing and how your government, United States, or your government anymore, right? Those people that apparently someone's putting into office and not addressing are shoving you and pushing you into the stinking abyss. It's a corporate construct without government, without property. You're in a corporation. You're part and parcel as only a stakeholder, as only a share part holder. It's like a sharecropper. This is the exaltation of corporation. Those things that you might have heard even William Roberts talking about the robber baron, the railroad barons, those that were utilizing the system to take advantage of it. So resilience, we've had enough. I got one more here. What was that? Resilience and ecology. Interesting thing. You can kind of look at this when it speaks to environment. As I tell you, it can be any environment, whether it's medical, whether it's housing, whether it's fiscal, whether it's environmental, your nature, and in ecology, not environmental, in ecology, resilience is the capacity of an ecosystem, and ecosystems can be like any environment. You can have all kinds of ecosystems. You have corporate ecosystems, don't you? So do not constrain your thoughts by your own lack of knowledge or awareness or prejudices here. This is a very expansive type of utility these people are coming at us at, and if you know that, then it's not much becomes so much of a surprise, and you're doing more quicker in order to counter it. That the resilience is the capacity of an ecosystem to respond to a perturbation or disturbance by resisting damage and recovering quickly. Such perturbations and disturbances can include stochastic events such as fires, flooding, windstorms, insect population explosions, and human activities such as deforestation, fracking of the ground for oil, pesticides, and sprays, introduction of exotic plants and animals, vaccines, pharmaceuticals, GMOs, and any number of other corporate impositions upon your health. Let's not end there. Or the internal ecosystems of the government that have been overtaken, that try to do the wrong things to make the excuse to keep putting this on. The resistance to that is resilience in an ecological frame. As I tried to expand this now, you can have the natural environment being resilient, you can have man's environment being resilient. It's the ecologies that you look at when you start to do the study. That I want, at least I hope you tracked with what I'm saying. We're seeing in this facade called the surveillance condition that was supposed to be removed, and the hero worship that's been wrapped around Snowden was false. It is false. It is literally bringing on the tools and bringing us one step closer to that overall condition that whatever the condition is, they will impose based on their reason for being, not yours. Now, I can go on. Like I said, there's just so much to talk about here, and I just went through kind of quick. But if you go to the blog, if you really are interested in what you're up against, this is, I would have to say, probably 90% of what we're up against. This is so pervasive and so comprehensive, so deep in its affliction, that I think everyone who understood this, as I do, really, you can't look anywhere without seeing. That's where I came up, and that wasn't just solely, but this is one of the main things why I tell you, we're infiltrated and surrounded. Now, literally, reality. Put yourself in a war field where you're infiltrated and surrounded. You're infiltrated and your own thoughts deceive you. You're infiltrated and surrounded by this. And yet you have to win. You have to prevail. Otherwise, they will take you down. The NSA will have data on you if you don't like it. Now, I'm not putting you in fear. It's just one of the things you have to know. This is the battlefield. This means that you have to figure out alternatives than going digital and going through their system is all. You have to learn how to be self-reliant. And that might be a little difficult, but That's part of this as well. That you step up and you say, I'm not going to tie into much of anything. Well, I say, get talks. At least go peer to peer with someone encrypted so that they can't see you. Don't use Skype. Don't let out this stuff. They build these dossiers that it's not, and it's not even any one of you. At any time, someone could be made to be the fool, and they're an innocent. These people are not beyond that to be. If it means that they will be resilient, if that means that they are secure, they will pull this off. Now, another tie, and I know it may sound a little bit like a stretch. I don't think so, and that's why I'm going to talk about it. I haven't not talked about it before. I touch it and we move. We touch it and move. And that's one of the little things I wish I could be more time and more organized to maybe get deeper into some of this. So it's a little more foundational than what I believe may come out. I know when you read through this stuff, you'll see what I'm saying, and it's foundational, and it makes all the sense in the world. And if nothing else, it's that major category you put out for thought, a possibility, probability. That what we've been also kind of riding with Snowden, now that he's been put on this pedestal, and all in the same week as well. And interestingly, and speaking to very serious things at international level between now what we see the propaganda coming in, of all places, of Russia and China, and the financial catastrophe that they're telling you is coming down. And listen, if you're not into that paper fiction, it's not going to matter, folks. That's what's so simple about this. But anyway, moving to a much more foundational and historic and I don't know. This is a much more foundational place about the reactions of people in the world over time. This story comes out, and we're tied to it through Snowden, by whom he went to and whom has been elevated along with him, in particular Greenwald and Manning, and Greenwald's boyfriend, and all that promotion that went on around that, like only homosexuals are the only ones that have the sense in the world. That this has been an ongoing theme, and I'm on record about this subject. A really good friend of mine was homosexual, and I was able to talk with him over a long time and figured out some things. That this is not a topic of, they want to talk about they want to put in all kinds of names, hate speech, or that you don't have a place, or you don't have I don't even know what all the comments would be, because that's not in my mind about what I'm doing. I don't even know. It's a point of truth that you see this promotion, and you see this promotion coming with the other promotions of things that I would have to say are not normal, and from the very simple reason that if homosexuality was normal, we would not exist as people. I've also talked to you about a marriage, so-called gay marriage. A gender-focused legal is impossible, because there's no gender recognition in legal. A person has no gender. So there's a whole lot of legal and law behind my observations that I don't take an opinion and judgment. It's a condition that we're looking at, that people are responding to, and we have to have a better thought about this so we can watch as the unprejudiced witness. That at the same time Snowden is being brought up as a hero, and all these people that helped him and supposedly helped him, I think it's all a show, actually. I think it's just another part of the play. Are brought up. We had and a lot of those people were homosexual. That the church, and in particular the Russian Orthodox Church, comes out and talks about the fact that it has to break. It's breaking from the Western churches, one connection at a time. Churches embracing homosexuality prepare members to accept the Antichrist, Russian Orthodox leader. Now, I want to look past all those things that people might get wrapped up in. This, to me, is a lot more fundamental. What I appreciated in this article was the statements of the church, the Russian Orthodox Church. Their statements are made in a different jurisdiction. They're made from a different place. That I looked at this and I said, wow, these people really are on point of their jurisdiction. That I thought this was a very powerful statement. This is a very ominous position that's gone on, and a very big rift that comes in when you understand that the Russian Orthodox Church is cleaving, is separating itself from Protestant churches in France and Scotland, and even will be the United States, over this so-called same-sex marriages. Remember, in legal there is no gender, so this is a violation even to the terms that the Church of Scotland approved ordaining clergy who are in same-sex civil unions was the problem of the Russian Orthodox Church. I'll tell you, let's jump over to the Church of Scotland. If it's a church and not a state church, but a church, it's of a separate jurisdiction than civil or secular union. That it had no authority to speak on the matter. That the Russian Orthodox Church is also saying here, you commingled, you adulterated your jurisdiction when you made it a recognition of civil unions when your jurisdiction is religious, if I can put it in that context. That I found an observation of the Russian Orthodox Church to be very powerful here. This is probably some of the most powerful observations and writings jurisdictionally, in opposite the two jurisdictions that are in existence that's been commingled in places like the United States. And the confusion that's been wrought by all this. That I thought this article in the same days, within days of the Snowden revelation, and the same, sword shaking that's going on internationally between the United States and Russia, to be almost an ominous discussion with respect to the secular and religious jurisdictions worldwide. That I was going to read, I just don't have the time. My mind wants to say a whole lot. My mind wants to analyze like crazy and explain it all to you so you can see what I'm seeing. I mean, to me, I think I have a fair response in what I'm looking at. I think people need to see it. I think that people that adopt the way I look at things seem to approach things a little differently, and we seem to cause the results that really are more required, that don't get opinionated or politicized. That this is exactly the kind of thing I want people to recognize. When you are in your jurisdiction and true to your jurisdiction, you don't have a say outside of it. You cannot commingle or adulterate your jurisdiction by embracing something else. And when you do, you've diminished yourself. That the Russian Orthodox Church is coming out to say that what the Western churches are doing are very problematic. They're impossible to resolve. A couple of the statements here, though. We separated ourselves from them as from the plague, as it's contagious, he said. The Russian Orthodox Church cannot support with its authority. That's a jurisdictional statement. With its authority. Something that is just an iniquity from the biblical point of view. They are confining their authority to the biblical point of view, are not adulterating that by stepping over into the secular civil union, which has no gender base, which people have an argument over. I don't know what the argument is, to tell you the truth. He goes on to say, these are not Christian communities anymore. This is another community with its own distinct name of LGBT. Its future is simple and clear, the fire of Gehenna. This is just what the Holy Scripture says. Again, confining their statement within their jurisdiction. The rejecting of Christian faith's immemorial teachings on sexual morality. The former Christian peoples are preparing themselves for the solemn reception of the Antichrist. This probably was the most powerful statement I've read in a long time. Not on the subject matter, but the source of its authority. Immemorial teaching. Do you have a concept of what that really means? Do you understand the power and what they've invoked? The immemorial teaching. This is outside of time and mind of man, beyond all jurisdictions, comes to us and we have to accept it. None can change this. None have the standing and status or authority or jurisdiction to question it. Immemorial teaching. This is probably I have not read as powerful statements of authority and source as I have in this report here. That this coming at the same time was a rebuke, almost a message to us as well. Hold to your principles. Don't let these images, these facades that develop for you, diminish your principles and remove things that we have held are reasoned for time in time immemorial. In other words, the simple aspect: if the society was normally homosexual, it wouldn't be a society. It would not exist. That is time out of mind, the truth. Nobody can argue. Absent you want to start starting artificial life in a test tube, I guess we can go there, but that's not natural. That's not normal either. Again, the fact that this comes up and we're seeing a global world, I actually determined in my view, just looking at this is starting to set, they're drawing the line for another type of world war. And who are they after now but the Vatican itself? It's severing the ability by principle that the Vatican, promoting the green religion, that talks of corporate indulgences and corporate control and church possession and control of all the believers, is saying you can't do that, and we can't do that. That you're no longer what you claim. That this is setting up the global world religious war right here, folks. I'm just letting you know. And it's all because someone who's been proclaiming to be an authority has never been. And they're willing to commingle aspects of the supposedly even the faith itself in order to make itself control the world under a color of authority. It's an ongoing felony going on here. That the church, the Russian Orthodox Church, is putting their foot down, drawing that line in the foundation of an immemorial teaching. And I have to, whether or not you want to believe in all that is irrelevant to me. Is irrelevant generally, and then to me, that's what they are setting. That's the principle they are laying. And boy, we could, in this country, we could certainly use that example. They actually declare that this community now that falls into this distinct name of LGBT is its own religion. And when you look at the promotion of it, it's kind of like climate change. You're a heretic if you don't believe it. Look at what's going on in the country of the United States. We're supposed to have free speech, and you can't even you can't speak about this stuff without being berated and condemned, and hate speech now. You can't even discuss it. It's not normal, but you can't discuss that. And the whole thing it's kind of a laugh about. How do you have same-sex marriage under civil union when civil unions are underneath a jurisdiction that recognizes no gender? To me, that you might as well just stop the discussion. Well, you have no discussion. You're in a contract or you're not. It's that simple. You're in a contract, the provisions and content and meaning of which is you've given over to an impartial third party, supposedly, who takes possession of that contract called the state to determine on any breach of it or not. That's it. This is all this is. That they've raised this issue up into a place where another religion has to draw the line was a trespass to them, folks, if you don't understand that part. International trespass going on. See, to me, at that level, I'm not talking about what you believe. We're now really looking at whether or not is that what you really believe, and you have the right to protect that. And in the calling out of the failure, you're actually, if nothing more, if it's just even by mere implication, you're outing a condition that's being used to beat you about the head and shoulders to advance, because when they beat you about the head and shoulders, it acts as if it's a resiliency to the system doing that. When you're fighting over being beat over the head and shoulders about all this stuff, you're not turning and going after those that are actually the criminals, who use it as cover. And cover for what? It's the future control, and it's a military control. They're not going to do it because they're nice and smiley and they have a flower for you. They're coming with weapons. These international codes, if you listen to William Roberts and become local, he'd read those things all the time. International code enforcement laws and all this nonsense. Now, you apply local United States of America land soil disposition law, and that authority evaporates. That's how fast that works. Why? Because you're putting law into something that's only management adaptive policy, isn't it? No law foundation at all. But we get ourselves into a place where we don't understand this, and where we are going in this so-called now non-surveillance surveillance state that hero Snowden has promoted now, with him now being shown to be the one that did it. Actually now running cover for an expanded public-private partnership surveillance state on steroids. When the code enforcement officer says you're a violator, you are a violator, an enemy combatant of the highest order, and if you want proof, in the same week, another story. Moving on to the ramifications of you being quiet. You're going to be a cricket stomped here pretty soon. You don't pay your bill, you better be careful. This is the ramification. This is what happens through corporate government. You don't do what the corporation says or how the management, the central council says it to be done. You're going to be swatted. Evidence this week: family raided by SWAT, SWAT, and they're dog shot for being unable to pay a utility bill. This is reality now, folks. This is in these United States. If you didn't think that you should have taken Battlefield America seriously. According to a federal lawsuit filed this month, Zork was a victim of a massive military-style raid. It's not military-style, it's military. And a subsequent puppycide. The raid was carried out because police said that they needed to, quote, to check if her home had electricity and natural gas service, close quote. Now, don't you think with all the big data they could have gone down to local utility provider and noticed whether or not that happened, that they've got to do this? But this is what they're doing. This is what people are allowing to be done. And as I've suggested, if they were to assert, and they didn't, but if they were to assert that their soil disposal rights trumped whatever code that was being put on them, this may or may not have happened. At least they would have made a better record. But who thinks of this stuff was going to happen is the other point. So you're local, you want to talk about paying exactions of every kind, pains, punishments, penalties, fees, fines, and taxes? This is your future under a resilient governance that's being placed on your head. And if you remain to be crickets, this is all you're really entitled to. And let's get ourselves over. What are you entitled to with respect to an NSA surveillance for medical patients? If you didn't see that coming through Obama's scare, here it is. That was an international imposition. Cradle-to-grave garbage that Hillary Clinton has been advocating with her husband or so, I guess. Here's your human rights, you monsters, without inheritable blood, as defined by Ballantyne's 1930 dictionary. Here's your human rights, folks. Remember, I've told you, be careful about them human rights. They're subject to the UN discretion if you go read carefully. Not so, you don't have to read so close, but read carefully. That if you thought your human rights allowed consent to be a part of your life to continue, we now have the court case all in the same week about where this all goes, folks, between the NSA, the surveillance, the medical surveillance, who's going to say what, how they're going to say it, what they're going to do to you. Court rules disabled patient can be starved to death against his will. A European court has issued a ruling that a disabled patient can be starved to death against his will. And now let's go back to last week when I was telling you this tip and the TIPP, the TIPP in particular. They were the European government, so-called, the councils, were petitioned to drop the pesticide regulations. And they did. If you don't think that European rule is, you think human rights under European rule is better, that these corporate treaty contracts, and I haven't even looked at the validity of them all. I think they're all violations, but without any way to enforce your judgment, it's a little more difficult. That if you thought that human rights meant you had the right to life, here's a decision to straighten that bad attitude you have right out of you, I hope. Vance Lambert, a tetraplegic patient who has been in a state of minimal consciousness in hospital for 6 years following a car accident, is currently receiving food and water via a feeding tube. The decision to cut his intravenous food and water supply has divided his family. Lambert's doctors and wife wanted to starve him to death, while his parents, who are vehemently opposed to ending his life, took his case to court. In January 2014, a court in France ruled against starving Lambert to death, but today, the European Court of Human Rights, you little monsters, today issued its decision by a vote of 12-5. The Grand Chamber. Kind of sounds like Ku Klux Klanish, doesn't it? But the Grand Chamber held that a state, capital S state, may take Lambert's life against his will. Kind of feeds up into last week's, gangland killings, doesn't it? State can take your life against your own will if you have human rights. And that's all you're going to have, if that much. I won't go on to read. I mean, it's on and on and on and on. This is just what's going on in this country. If you thought, we hear the war on the vets, there was a little story I was skeptical of. I may be still skeptical of it, but during some of these the occupieds, there was this vet who told the police that it wasn't working. There is no honor in police brutality, I think was his comment. Well, he's had a problem, and apparently it's vets have a high percentage of vets feel like they want to kill themselves, and so he finally went in to try and get some help. Went to the VA hospital, and he said he wanted to be watched. And he had apparently been drinking, and so he got himself in a low spot. And when he finished and he wasn't drunk no more, he realized that he wasn't going to kill himself anymore. It's just one of those things. Then they decided they were going to hold him against his will. And they are. And so here we have the European courts willing to... your consent means nothing. The state has the control over their life. And here, against his will, the state here in the United States is holding, through the VA federal, they're holding him without any actual right. If you think being quiet on any of these things is helping. The evidence is here over and over. And so we see these international linkages through sustainable development. We see now inside we have a massive surveillance built on the data principle, the data gathering and monitoring and evaluation and adaptive management principles. We see that now being enforced and controlling these agreements, controlling governments over your right to a healthy life. If they can take your life, they can poison your life. And now, under the skin of TPIP and TPP, is a TISA, yet another leaked treaty you've never heard of, makes secret rules for the Internet. as they lock down this ability for them to gather information. If you thought this USA Freedom Act was the relinquishing of this data collection, please think again. More evidence, all in the same week. It's like as if they come and they just roll this stuff out, and so they pull it all together, and you only see a couple things, and you only see a couple things coming at you, and they just shot about 1,000 things at you, and you just see what you saw. This is in the process. This is what's coming through. It's all the same thing. It's all for the same outcome. It's not for your benefit. You thought you had human rights. You do. You're a little monster. That's what the definition is. You have no inheritable blood, which means you have no right to property, so you probably are property, and the state will take care of you, you little ward you. You incapacitated ward. I hope you reverse these words and actually know what they mean. When you can't take care of yourself, you're done. And this is now becoming a presumption. And I hear crickets. This is the thing that's kind of astonishing to me. Now, so all of this is happening even within the law. But there is this supposed law sitting there that I know we're using. Even we don't make a question of it. I don't assert a Fifth Amendment right. I just presume it's there and saying you violated it. I have probable cause to believe you violated the law. Prove different. Show cause. That this this resilience and sustainable development is adjunct policy. It is not constitutional. It doesn't go by Republican representative form norms. It doesn't go by anything you understand, and these people know it. In fact, if you look at their policy consensus information, there's cautions about this. They say, listen, what you're doing is not constitutional. It's not normal to, they call it democracy, but we look at it the Republican form of representative government, which means that they're not looking at the obligations of the government to protect you. That they have to figure out ways why the Johannesburg Treaty was not made a treaty because they couldn't ratify it. It's called soft law. They have to get around the Constitution somehow, and that's the public buy-in. That's where they get you to agree. That it's overt out now that the UN wants to bypass the United States Constitution to enforce climate rules. Now, on its face, that sounds ridiculous. But look at what they're doing with the soft law. Whether we like it or not, it comes to the United States Congress. They will refuse, says a French foreign minister who said that in conference in Bonn, Germany. The United Nations and the United States government have constantly butted heads with each other. Their principles are wholly incompatible, whereas the United States First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. The UN Declaration of Human Rights states these rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purpose and principles of the United Nations. That it's out now, if you haven't been listening behind the woodshed and understood it, that what's coming in is the antithesis to what we have as norms in the United States of America, and principally because of our property rights. What they now call happiness. Happy, happy, joy, joy. It's not that one. It's not what the UN is twisting through their consensus statements like came out of Governor Kitzhaber, the felon criminal that's now resigned from office. It's property. It's laws about property. It's the records that keep the evidence for the existence of the property and the maintenance of that through the courts. That's not a typical thing in the world. The UN is the antithesis to this, and everything you see that's touching resilience and sustainability is the brand that is this statement that France is saying we have to bypass the U.S. Constitution. Well, they have, I'm telling you. This is just a statement that like they're trying to tell you that they haven't. They have. If you are dealing in anything that's considered a sustainable development, and I challenge anyone to find me a website dealing with the government that some place on it, or a corporation that's of any multinational character, or an NGO, or some nonprofit that talks about environment or whatever. I would challenge anybody to show me any website that shows no discussion about sustainable development, climate change, adaptive management, visions, all these things that I've been talking about today, that to tell you you're infiltrated and surrounded already. It's in the government. Sustainable development is the policy of the federal government. French minister said 2015 climate deal must avoid U.S. Congress. You got to look to see how they're going to try and do that. The global climate agreement being negotiated this year must be worded in such a way that it doesn't require approval by the United States Congress. Well, then it won't be a treaty then, folks, will it? But they're going to try and push it back anyway. This is an international, this is what, an overthrow, if you will, an attempt. This is another declaration of war on the Constitution, and the Vatican is in there, because that's the September meeting I was just talking about, that talks about resilience and sustainability. They're broaching the idea now, as they did the college now, if you're a climate realist, you should be charged as an anti-mafia under RICO. That senator needs to be removed from office and put into prison. He's a felon. He's a terrorist. He's actually advocating a political overthrow of this country, to put people who want realism, reality, to actually be reality, instead of all the other things that weren't talked about. And I'm going to touch this really quickly. I didn't want to get too deep, and this ties into the confusion around gender of all the stories that weren't told. Certainly, you didn't hear a lot of those that I just talked about here this way behind Woodshed. This Jenner character. I won't even say the first name because I'm confused now. All the stories that the mainstream media would not hit while they confuse gender things with this Jenner character, which to me, on its face, for me, really is an insult in a lot of ways. Not whoever wants to decide on their own is fine, but when it came out that I understand it everywhere was pictures of this Jenner character, how good she looked and how sexy she was. Is that a woman, folks? Where are the women? That womanhood has been reduced to how much money you can put in, how much airbrushing you can put onto a picture. That when it went public and didn't stay private for him or her, they made it my business to start looking at the adulteration that's going on, that's certainly tied into the Orthodox Church saying, listen, there's a big confusion here and we can't stand for it. Then I'm telling you, you need to start making some very set principles in your life over what's being promoted and what is being made important over the more important things that we're not even responding to, that we have every duty and obligation and responsibility to respond to. When you see this kind of stuff that's actually promoting the same lineage of things I've talked about over this broadcast, and I've tied it to where I've tied it, and you do the research, you should as well see what I've seen and understand this is a big psyop. And if we don't cut ourselves loose from it and respond in a proper way, we're going to see this style world, this world of insanity, of confusion, and the lack of actual sustainable character. Why? Because if you have a world of a bunch of people that don't understand the importance and distinction and separateness of the genders and buy into this legalistic sense, you won't have a humanity. And those that plan for less population, they get their way. Do you think it's going to affect them? Highly unlikely. So thank you very much for tuning in today. And I guess we're at the end of that. Appreciate your support. Anywhere you can. Grimner, I'm sure, has a donate button, if you will. A Doge of war, protecting and defending against the war that we see around us. America, the battlefield, is a Doge icon for the Dogecoin, if you want to do that. Or PayPal, or maybe get on over to WT. Join up as a social network. Better than, I understand it's better because there's just no surveillance in there other than the people that are participating. Contribute there. Maybe donate to WT to keep the servers going, because they do that. And again, you didn't hear a commercial here, unless unless I'm an ongoing commercial. You didn't hear a promotion. Doing it for the good of us, I hope. And I don't know why that wouldn't be, why that's even a question that you need. If you can't do anything else, if you have the ability, please donate to keep the servers going. Even if you don't sign up, you see why. Donate. Jules puts her time in the website. The websites are very hard and difficult to keep up with. Monitoring. I appreciate all that work, and all the broadcasters, the actual terrestrial broadcasters. I certainly appreciate you continuing and carrying the signal. And folks, it's just about us stepping up, finding what wrong we need to make right, understanding the battlefield, and then addressing that and persisting until that wrong is made right. Take care.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.